All right, so we are still looking at Unit 6, and now we're going to start talking about loops. So just to kind of give you some perspective on where we're going with all of this, we started Unit 6 talking about list. So lists give us this way to combine multiple elements together and store that to a single variable. We are now going to look at loops, which is a way for us to look at code instructions repeatedly until we're done with them, right? So we can kind of loop over these certain lines of code until we're done, and then we can move on to the next task. After we do loops this week, next week we're going to talk about something called traversals, and this is where we bring the list and the loops together. So basically we are going to use loops to look at each element in our list one after the other automatically until we are done with that list, right? So that's kind of where we're going with this. So when we're talking about loops, if you were in class, you would have this game board, you'd have these little barriers, and you'd have this robot, and we'd be kind of going through these one by one. So today we're just going to talk about these, and hopefully in doing so, you're going to get some perspective on how these loops work. All right, so to start, we're going to say this is our game board. You put your little robot down here in the middle bottom square. It's facing up. And the goal is to get the robot to this purple square, right? And we have this one command, right? We're just going to call it move forward. So every time we call this command, this robot's going to move forward one square. So the goal here with this particular game is to get the robot from this starting square and then have it move up to this purple square. All right, so obviously to do this, we would just call move forward 4 times, right? It would move forward one spot each time this move forward command was called, and we would end up in this purple square. So this kind of introduces our first loop, right? And in coding, we have 2 different types of loops that we could use. The first one is called a while loop. Basically what a while loop is saying is, hey, as long as something is true, run the code inside of the while loop and keep doing this over and over until that thing is no longer true. So what they've given us here is this little chart or this workflow. And some of this, like, it should look kind of familiar to you because we did this when we were first introducing the if-else statement. So this green diamond, this is that diamond that our Boolean expression would go into, right? This is the condition, or as they said here, that something is true. So this is our Boolean expression that's going to evaluate to true or false. Every time it evaluates to true, we would come down here, do whatever code we needed to in this orange square, and then it's going to start over. So it's going to look at that condition again and say, okay, is this condition still true? If it is, it will run the code in the orange block and then check again. It's going to keep doing this until this condition becomes false, at which point it will exit that loop. So if we were to look at this in practice, this is what a while loop would look like if you were coding it, and you'll see a couple things here that you've done before, right? First off, we're creating this variable called steps and we're setting it equal to 0. So we're still creating variables, we're still assigning them values. Inside of this while loop, in the parentheses, this is where your Boolean expression goes. So the expression they have written is steps is less than 4. So when this first runs, I know steps is 0. So while 0 is less than 4, that is true. So it's going to run the code inside the while loop. So it would move forward and it's going to add 1 to steps. So after it runs the first time, steps will move from 0 to 1. 1 is still less than 4, so it's going to run the code, add 1 to steps, and it's going to keep doing this until this becomes false. Right? So if I kind of, if you watch this play out, you'll see our steps starts at 0. While steps is less than 4, it's going to move forward and it's going to add 1 each time to steps. So obviously 0's less than 4, that's true, so it moves the robot forward and then it adds 1 to steps. So now my steps is 1. So then I'm going to start round 2, right? 1 is less than 4, that's true, so it's going to move forward, add 1 to steps. So now steps is 2. It's going to check again. 2 is less than 4, that's true, so it's going to move forward, add 1 to steps. So now steps is 3. 3 is less than 4, so that's true. It's going to move forward, add 1 to steps, and now steps is 4. And then it's going to check, is steps less than 4? All right. This is going to evaluate to false now because 4 is not less than 4. 4 is equal to 4, so that is false. It will not move forward. It will not add 1 to steps. It's going to exit out and run any other code that I have now that it's done. All right, and that's the basic premise of a while loop. You'll notice this var steps and the way we're adding 1 to it each time. This is basically that counter pattern that we've been talking about. So we're still using variables. We're still using those patterns, specifically the counter pattern this time. But what I want you to notice, this line, steps plus 1. When we go to the next screen, you're going to see that line is not there anymore. And if I was to run this code, there's a problem now, right? Because I am not adding 1 to steps anymore, which means I set steps to 0 and it's never changing. Which means this condition will never evaluate to false, and that's a big problem. So if I kind of run this, you'll see my robot's just going to go off the screen, right? So we have to make sure that we are adding 1 to steps every time inside of this while loop. If we don't do that, then it creates something called an infinite loop, and that's bad, right? If you are, and some of you will see this, you're going to start working on code, you're going to create a loop, you're going to run your program, and then it just like nothing happens, and all of a sudden your browser is going to get really slow. That basically means that you have created an infinite loop, and behind the scenes that loop is running over and over so many times that your browser's running out of memory. So when that happens, you can try to stop the program, but if you don't catch it soon enough, you're basically going to have to close that browser tab and open a new one to start over. So you got to be really careful with those, right? We don't want to create infinite loops, so make sure you have that step command in there. All right, so they're going to introduce a new command now called turn right. So this is just going to turn the robot to the right. So here's some code. We're going to run through this again. So we're going to start steps at 0. While steps is less than 4, this time we're going to move forward and we're going to turn right, and then we're going to add 1 to steps. So the first time it goes through, it's going to move forward, turn right, add 1 to steps. So now my steps is 1 for round 2. Again, steps minus or steps less than 4, that is true. So it's going to move forward, turn right, add 1 to steps. Then for round 3, it's still going to be steps is less than 4, so that's going to be true. So it's going to move forward, turn right. Then it's going to add 1 to steps. So now my steps is 3. So it's going to 3 is less than 4. It's going to move forward, turn right, add 1 to steps, and then it increases steps to 4. And at that point, this will evaluate to false, and it will not move anymore. So I'll be done. All right. Again, this is just kind of reminding you that this counter variable is set to an initial value. Right. So we need to create our counter variable, set it to 0. We need to have a Boolean expression which checks the condition of that variable. That's this line right here. And then we need a statement which increases or decreases the variable that's being checked. So in this case, it's the steps plus plus. Right? So those are kind of the 3 things that you have to have for a while loop. Right? If you forget this steps plus plus, or you write this while loop in a way that this will never evaluate to false, you will create that infinite loop. And that's where your browser is going to crash. You're probably going to have to restart it. It's going to be a little frustrating. All right, so that was the first type of loop, a while loop. The second type of loop is a for loop. The main difference between the two, or I shouldn't even say the main difference, but really you need to know when to use one or the other. I'll tell you first, in this class, for the most part, you are going to use for loops almost every time. But if you were coding a project and you were trying to decide whether or not you should use a while loop or a for loop, the answer is pretty easy. If you know how many times that loop is going to run, then you use for loop. If you don't know how many times the loop's going to have to run before it evaluates to false, then you should use a while loop. An example is maybe you're writing a game that's going to guess, you're going to generate a random number, and then the user has to guess that number, so you're going to keep asking them over and over again for a number until they get it correct. You do not know how many guesses it's going to take for that user to guess the random number. So that would be a good case to use a while loop. If you had, a list and you know that that list has a certain length and you want to look at every element in that list, in that case, you'd want to use a for loop because you can set this up to make sure it looks at every single item in that list and then stops when it gets to the end. So you do know how many times it's going to loop. So this is kind of some background on that, but let's kind of talk about this for loop. You'll notice it's written different, but it has the same component. So in the while loop, we had to create this counter variable and set it equal to 0. We do the same thing in this for loop, only it's the first part of this command that we write. So for the for loop, we're going to write for, parentheses. First, we're going to say var I equals 0. Okay? You can use any variable name here you want. Most people use I. But this is just creating that counter variable just like we did on the while loop. The second part, we have to have this Boolean expression that will eventually evaluate to false. So on the while loop, we put it here. On the for loop, we put it right here. Right? We're separating each one of these with this semicolon. And then you'll notice the third part of the while loop was we had to increment that counter variable, which is what this is doing right here. Right? This I++ basically says, hey, take this I variable that I created, add 1 to it. So if I didn't use I, right, maybe I used K or I used, my num, you would just make sure var my num equals 0, my num less than 4, my num ++. You just have to be consistent within these three parts that are separated by the semicolon and use the same variable name for each one. So we're looking at turn left, right? That's just going to turn the robot left 90 degrees. So here is an example using a for loop. On this little sticky note here, we're going to keep track of I because that's our counter variable. So every time this evaluates the true, it's going to move forward, turn right, move forward, turn left. So if we run it the first time, I is 0. Right? 0 is less than 3, so it's going to move forward, turn right, move forward, turn left, and then it's going to add 1 to I. So now I is 1. 1 is less than 3, so it's going to run again. It's going to move forward, turn right, move forward, turn left. Now that it's done, it's going to add 1 to I, so I is 2, and then it's going to check the condition again. 2 is less than 3, so it's going to move forward, turn right, move forward, turn left, and then add 1 to I, so it's going to make I 3. At this point, 3 is not less than 3, so this loop will finish, it will exit, and then run any other code that I have. All right, so here is another one. This time we've got our for loop, var I equals 0. We're saying if I is less than or equal to 2, I++. So every time this is true, it's going to move forward twice, turn to the right, move forward. We're starting I at 0. Right? 0 is less than or equal to 2, so it's going to move forward twice, turn right, move forward. I now becomes 1. 1 is less than or equal to 2, so it will move forward, turn right, move forward. It will then add 1 to I, making I equal to 2. 2 is less than or equal to 2, so that is still true. So it will move forward, turn right, move forward, add 1 to I, making I 3, and now my condition evaluates to false, and the code will be done. All right, here's just one more example. This time, instead of saying I is less than or equal to 2, they're saying I is less than 2. It's going to move forward, turn left, move forward twice. So I is 0. 0 is less than 2, so it runs the code. Adds 1 to I, 1 is still less than 2, so it's going to move forward, turn left twice, move forward twice, and then add 1 to I. So now 2 is this is not true, right? 2 is not less than 2, it's equal to, so it will exit the code, and that's where the robot would end. Right, so we're just going to kind of make this a little bit harder to kind of finish up this lesson. Now they're going to add these barriers, right? So I can't move to a square that has a barrier. Also on our game board, I cannot exit the board anymore. So we have these new commands where we can ask a question. Can move left is just saying, hey, can I move left? Is that true or false? Can move right, right? Is that true or false? So they have some examples for us. Can move. If I was in this position with that barrier to the left, I can move forward. That's true. I can move to the right. That's true. Move left is false because I cannot go to where the barrier is. Can move backward is true because I could move backwards. If I was in this position, move forward would be true. Move right would be true. Right? Move left is going to be false because I can't exit the game board. And then can move backward is going to be false because I can't be on the same block as a barrier. So it's going to give us this grid, and here's our code. So for I equals 0, as long as I is less than 3, I'm going to run that code. You'll see that they've thrown 2 different if statements in there. And we're going to iterate I by 1 each time. So I is 0, right? 0 is less than 3, so it's going to say, can I move right? That's true, so it's going to turn right and move forward. Then it will turn left, then it asks can move forward. That is false, so it will not run this code. So at that point, it's going to add 1 to I and make I 1. 1 is still less than 3, so it's going to start over. Can move right is true, so it will turn right and move forward. It will then turn left, then it will ask can I move forward? That's true, so it will. I then becomes 2. 2 is less than 3, so it's going to run again. Can move right, that's false, so it will skip that, turn left, and then ask can I move forward? That is false because I can't go to a barrier. So now I'm here. It's going to add 1 to I again. So I is now 3, and then it will say, okay, is 3 less than 3? That is false, so my code will end. Finally, we're going to run this program. So they just kind of move the board around. Here's our code with the 2 if statements. They've added a turn right in here. They still have the turn left. So we're starting I at 0. As long as I is less than 4, it's going to keep doing this. So round 1, right? 0 is less than 4. So it's going to say, can I move forward? Which it can. It's going to turn left. Can move forward is false because there's a barrier, so it won't. And then it will turn right, so it's going to end here. So obviously now I is 1. It's going to do the same thing. You would end up between these two. I is now 2. 2 is still less than 4, so it's going to run it again. You would end here. I is 3. 3 is still less than 4, so it's going to run again. Right? And then you will finish that one up. So obviously you don't have the game boards. You can't do this challenge, but if you wanted to, you could set up your own game board and kind of run through this. But again, we're just really looking at, this idea of loops. It's a way for us to run code repeatedly. There's a while loop and a for loop, so you need to know the syntax for each one. They work the same, right? Both of them have a counter variable. It's just how we write the code. So your lessons this week are going to be practicing writing this code. And like I said, this for loop in this intro course, this is what we do 90% of the time. Some of your exercises will show you the while loop, but when it comes to projects and your performance task and your midterm and your finals, it's going to be the for loop. So this is the one that you need to make sure you understand. All right. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and let me know. There is a link to a video on Canvas. It is this, kind of how to use loops lesson. I do suggest that you watch that. It's listed as one of your links on the Canvas module. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck.